Hear me up? Okay, welcome back everybody. I hope you had a good break and managed to catch up with friends, new friends. Purposely gave you quite a lot of time to network, because I know all of you enjoy that, meeting up with people you haven't met maybe for a year or more. So we'll have more opportunities for networking breaks and also for lunch. So we move on now, having had some great keynote speakers in our storyboard, taking us from sort of the government view, some of what's happening in the technology with Professor Rimmer, and then obviously the experience, sort of the Forrester report, really talking about how businesses are viewing technology. And now, therefore, in our storyline and storyboard, we're not going to go into the detail. So we've assembled a very large lineup. I think it's the biggest lineup of panelists I've had at a conference. But it's, I think, testament of the interest in this particular topic. So we're going to move in now to the use of technology in digital finance and commerce. And I'm pleased that Vincenzo, who is a fellow board director, has put himself forward to run the panel. He may regret that at the end of the day, but he's going to have a go. So Vincenzo, I leave it in your capable hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, thanks also to... Thank you. Thanks for BIIA for this opportunity, and thanks for the speakers that are going to make me look smart by just sitting here and listening to them. So thanks a lot for that. So the panel is on the use of technology in digital finance and commerce. And the word digital kind of makes the point that it is technologically dependent, because obviously finance and commerce have been around for thousands of years, but it's been with the introduction of the World Wide Web, the internet, smartphones, that really the way in which we trade, borrow, and do commerce has been completely different by making it an online experience for the customer. We're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. We're at the cusp of it. And so because I have such an esteemed panel, I would like to first just go with a quick fire round and ask each of you to say one or two topics, trends, threats, opportunities, whatever you want to focus on, that you think will lead the next stage of evolution for us in digital finance and commerce. And while doing that, if you can take 3 minutes to say two topics, and also introduce just, we have your bios, but just introduce why you're working on these specific topics. So, Paul, I would ask you first. Give me your two topics.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. So my name is Paul Costas. I'm Chief Sales Officer for Cedar Rose. Started 3 months ago, come from the industry with Moody's before. So definitely important for us to address the importance of technology. And I would focus on two aspects, one internal and the other one being external. Internal really in terms of enabling us to, to enhance the way that we're basically serving our customers. Really thinking about, the capacity to ingest a lot more data today. Structured, unstructured, we'll talk about it later on, but definitely to get to insights that are also much more detailed. So that is the first thing that is quite important to us. And then the second thing is the external element of how we participate in ecosystems related to digital finance, where we increasingly play a role as a data provider into digital finance products that are basically technology enabled, thinking about buy now, pay later platforms and other similar solutions that are available on the market. So those are the two areas really.
Thank you. Indy?
Hi, I'm Anindita, CEO of Credence. My focus area has been, generative AI, specifically with respect to business intelligence. Of course, I have been an ex-banker, have done finance pretty much across the world. That's where, this becomes very interesting for me. So the other topic that we would like to focus on is cross-border trade, specifically with respect to Asia, because, that's the place where we see a lot of South-South trade happening. We see a lot of data not being available, SMEs not participating. So that's the place which interests me, given new technology and new data input which is there.
Thank you. Mayur?
Hi, everyone. Mayur Kapoor from TransUnion. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for APAC. So two topics, right? It's funny and it's probably also scary. You can't sit in any panel on technology these days and not talk about AI and ML, right? So when you said two topics, I thought, dude, doesn't get easier than this. I'm also going to talk about AI and ML, right? But then I thought, let's give this a bit of a twist, right? So what I really want to talk about today is what do technologies like AI and ML unlock with a very specific consumer lens, right? So that consumers can then transact in the digital finance and commerce world with confidence, right? And coincidentally, two of the things that AI, ML, and other technologies are unlocking for consumers are AI and ML, right? So let me not reveal what my AI and ML are right now. We'll get to it. But what I can tell you is this. What I'm going to talk about today is very closely tied to who TransUnion is as a company and what we stand for. What we are passionate about is two things. The first is to make sure that every consumer in every market that we are in is visible and is represented in the right way in the marketplace. And the second is to make sure that we empower them with the right tools and knowledge so that they can move up in life and meet their life goals, right? So those are the themes under which I'm going to talk about, but let's leave the rest for later.
Sounds interesting. Bhuvan?
Thanks, Vincenzo. I don't know why they seated me next to Mayur. Super energetic, and I feel I'm bringing down the energy. That's just how I talk. So apologies for that. But just on the, the way I think about trends generally is kind of looking at the driving factors. So the two big driving factors really have been government, geopolitical situations, and how that results in decisions by respective countries on what they got to do. The other element has been really technology and the competition and change that is being driven by technology. So looking at those two big trends and then looking at what our government is doing in terms of infrastructure, governance, compliance, enablement, and so on, really where we can play a part, CTOS can play a part, is really more on the enablement of what the respective governments are trying to do. I mean, we are a global data provider. We work in 33 countries. We provide company information around the world. And so where we can really support really has been, I think, AI and automation. I think Mayur have already said that. So yes, definitely that's a focus. I think all our speakers today have mentioned that. And it's really more specifically on seeing that as kind of a last mile solution to digitalization. That's where I see the value of AI and all this automation tech. Secondly would be the convergence of compliance and risk processes. This is largely, from our observation, being driven by the geopolitical situation and also government decisions. And essentially industry is trying to keep up with these changes. So it's kind of forcing their change, and we are trying to participate in that process.
Thank you. Elias?
Hello. My 2 points that I would like to talk today. First of all, Brazil is a country that is very addictive to technology. Okay, the Brazilians love technology. So what I would like here to share with you, what we have been doing in Brazil, what are the strategies that we are developing to follow our customer, the banks, and also how we're gonna serve, the consumer at the other end. So this is what I want to share with you, some points that the market is being addressing in a way to cope with those two challenges.
Thank you. Diederik?
It's a very international panel, because next to the Brazilian, I'm a Dutchman, Diederik. I'm a doctor in human-centered AI and co-founder and a CEO of AdviceRobo, a non-executive board member at IKEA Bank. A decade ago, when we started our company in 2013, after 2 years, we were able to scale that from the Netherlands to the United Kingdom. And there was no bank that wanted to fund us, although I was a former board member of the ING Bank. And that made me realize that the way we look at things is really one-dimensional. We look only through the financial lens. while we were a very creditworthy company at that moment, if you looked at our behavior. So we shifted that lens to looking at humans. For me, the two themes are human-centered AI. That's also why I became a doctor in that. It's how to humanize AI. The professor also talked about that. And the other thing is that we are not able to change this world for the good of the small and medium businesses, for the gig workers, for all the unseen consumers, if we are not also transform our business models. So that's my second theme, is human-centered AI and the transformation of business models to make that possible.
Thank you. Well, it's not surprising that each one of you has mentioned AI as the first of the topic, but I do appreciate that we're all coming at it from a different angle. So let me now, after the rapid fire that you are introduced to the topics, let me go a little bit more in depth on each one of the topics that you guys raised. And I'll do one question each for you on the first topic, and then we'll come back around and do the second question, the second topic. So Paul, you mentioned, well, in credit analysis, there's always been this flywheel concept where you get data, and once you have enough data, then you need analysis to make sense of that data. Once you have analysis, you need decisions based on that analysis. And then the result of the decisions feeds back into the data point. That's always been the case. But nowadays that we have so many different data points, so many opportunities of going there, there's been an explosion. So how do you see generative AI applied to credit analysis helping in this context?
Thank you. It is very important to actually stay away a little bit of the buzzwords, I would say, and come back to what it really means for us to be using generative Gen AI when it comes to credit risk analysis. So we really look at it from the point of view where the Gen AI capability allows us to basically enhance the human expertise. So instead of having people working on collecting data, structuring that information, vetting the quality of the information, we stay away from that. We tend to have access to a lot more data, and we think about looking at risk factors. And I think that is the key today. You can basically assess a lot more risk factors than the traditional financial related factors or quantitative factors that we've been taking into consideration. So I think Professor Morris spoke about cybersecurity. It's one of those that you could take into consideration. Legal and compliance factors are all connected to the financial health of an organization. Today, by using Gen AI tools, you can basically factor that into your credit risk assessment a lot more than any time before because there are capabilities to do that. Yeah, but you could also think about, obviously, country-related risks, operational risks, climate-related risks. All of these aspects are today part of the picture and can be taken into consideration. Now, obviously, the other topic is looking at the data itself. So what is it? It's structured, it's unstructured, it's alternative data sets. What can you derive in terms of sentiment analysis from alternative data sets, looking at news, looking at information that would come from bill of lading information, so focusing on trade, et cetera, et cetera. What do you do with that, and how do you consider that in your analysis, right? And then we think about the interpretation and the summarization of the information. There again, Gen AI allows us to be a lot more precise and basically provide a lot more insights. Now, the question is definitely how synthetic do you want it to be versus what is still produced by teams and analysts that have been working in this space for some time. But really looking at it from the point of view of other capabilities which we are not covering today, definitely thinking about what it means then to be able to manage portfolios of companies and the exposure from a portfolio point of view. How do you look at early warning signals when basically setting up specific scenario analysis in a portfolio management capability? And then obviously there are other aspects which we're not covering, but which are equally important related to ingestion of documents using AI and OCR technologies combined. But ultimately it is really there for us at least, and again, I'm talking about the internal use case, to really enhance the human expertise, and obviously always with the idea in mind of serving our customer better and faster.
Thank you, Paul. Indy, so we looked at Gen AI serving the customer. You also mentioned Gen AI, but from a different approach, focusing on cross-border information. So how do you think that Gen AI is impacting specifically the business information industry, especially in cross-border trade? And given that a lot of practitioners are here, and I'm sure they will want to know, do you see this more as opportunity or threat for the BI industry?
Sure, these are exciting times, especially because first time in history, we have human language converging with machine in a way, machine speed. So, of course, it leads to a lot of discussion around biases, others, but fundamentally, you can be closer to the customer. That's what it helps us in doing. The second thing is, all of us talk about data. So first, how many data points are we using today? What are the alternative data points? And what is a data point if it is not leading to a faster and a better decision for the eventual decision maker? Because siloed data has no meaning today, the way the world is working from that perspective. So what we believe is, what is the fastest data, which is the most accurate, going to the decision maker, is going to thrive in this industry. So whether we productize it, of course, we can hyper localize it, we can state a lot of things, but eventually, how, when, where, who is gaining from that data? Because access to data today, I think, has less meaning because data access is democratized, more or less. So I just like to present, what we think will be how the business intelligence will sort of work. And we are seeing a transition right now. Earlier, these were still data points, static reports coming to you in a pre-formatted manner, which was completely, user agnostic. So a supply chain use case and a credit use case and a corporate bank use case used to be same. We think from there, we have gravitated to a digital interface wherein, you get all the data across legal, compliance, AML, finance, everything which is aggregated, is presented, is easy to comprehend. From there, I think we are going into a use case specific thing, which is basically, we are going into a conversational AI product, where a bank manager looks at the product and asks, is it company fundable? That's the answer they are looking for. They are not really looking for, DSCR being X or TL by T and W, standard cases, Y. They are looking for decisions being made, of course, with access to complete data. And we think with this conversational AI, we will go into hyper-localization, wherein you can actually ask, what is the debt profile of the company? Because maybe that's the most material thing for you. And that is how, something like, we are able to do, wherein, we are able to query the report, create a context around that particular corporate, and give an answer specifically to the particular use case. So that's what we fundamentally believe is going to be the play in future.
Thank you, very interesting. Now, Mayur, I think you kind of teased us with the terminology you used because you talked about AI, but with a twist. And something tells me we're not talking about smart machines. So what are we talking about?
Yeah, not smart machines, but smart missions, right? So, and one of our smart missions at TransUnion is inclusion, right? So I'm sure many of you guessed what I was talking about. So that's my I, right? But it is not only inclusion, right? It is what I call authentic inclusion. So what is authentic inclusion and why is it different from financial inclusion, right? Authentic inclusion is about going to consumers where they are and talking to them in the language that they speak giving them information in how they like to consume information. And that could be unique to every person. And technology today allows us to do that, to contextualize the conversation for every, even a country like India, 1.4 billion people, you can actually contextualize it to every single person, right? So let me break that down into some of the things I spoke about, right? So one of the things I spoke about is reaching consumers where they are and giving them information on how they consume it. Now think of two different consumers, right? One is a young Gen Z consumer, right, in a city. The second is a old consumer living in the remotest parts of India in a village, right? Think about how they consume information and what their life looks like, right? For the Gen Z consumer, his life is his smartphone, right? Everything he does is on his smartphone, and he likes to consume information in bite-sized pieces, right? Technology enables us to push exactly that to him today, right? So information on his credit score in a jazzy graph, right? What does it look like, right? In a gamified way, which is what he enjoys, right? The consumer in the village is very different, right? He probably doesn't even have a smartphone at home. He probably has a small device in some corner of the room, right? And in spite of the AI ML that the world is going through, they still like the human touch. They want the human connection. They want a human to speak to, right? And we like to enable that as TransUnion. So as an example, what we've done in India is we've partnered with the last mile. So there are these internet-enabled centers in villages called CSCs, customer service centers. These are actually government-curated centers which are run by village entrepreneurs. And the idea is that you can walk into a CSC and ask questions about your government card, or you can get any government service, right? So we thought, why don't we piggyback on that and partner with them? Because the consumers are already walking in, that villager is already coming to these CSCs. And now today, in over 400,000 of these CSCs in India, a villager can walk in and ask questions about, okay, what is this credit score? What is my credit score? Can you get my credit score for me? And that is an assisted digital model for him to pull his credit report, right? So that is live and it exists, right? The second piece I want to talk about is language. So I said, we need to speak to them in a language that they understand, right? Now in India alone, people speak more than 22 languages, right? So putting content in English doesn't help anyone, right? And that's why things like artificial intelligence and machine learning are helping us transcribe our content in near real time to a local language, right? So you have an English website, it can get converted to any language, and that is something that technology is enabling, right? The third piece I want to talk about is, what if this villager I just spoke about is illiterate, right? He cannot fill a form, he cannot even sign a form. Should that be an impediment for him to get credit or be included? No, right? So the way technology is enabling that today is through biometrics, right? So again, in that example that I gave, the villager just walks in and his thumbprint is enough to validate his ID in real time and pull his credit score from the bureau in real time. That's all he needs to do, right? Is put his thumbprint on a reader, right? And that's it. The next piece is, okay, so he got ID validated, right? His credit score was pulled from the bureau. But what if he's new to credit, right? He doesn't have a credit score. What then? Should that prevent him from being included? No, right? So Indy spoke about alternative data, right? So we are in the alternative data space ourselves. We also partner with various alternative data companies. One of the technologies enabling that at TransUnion is called Credit Vision Link, which enables us to ingest all this alternative data on consumers and give every consumer a score, even if they don't have a credit score from their own credit history, right? Finally, I want to talk about, okay, so the consumer has probably got their first loan thanks to this journey that I spoke about, right? They probably want to continue to reach TransUnion for questions. They want to call us. They want to email us in the cities. They want to, the chatbot, right? Again, Indy spoke about it. So I think technology is helping us create a single view of the consumer, right? So if somebody has emailed us and then called us, we know that, okay, this person has emailed before and this is what his problem area is. And it is helping us serve consumers faster, right? And the chatbots have AI and ML, so we are able to redirect the queries in real time to the person. If somebody in TransUnion has not responded to an email, he gets an automatic alert saying, hey, this email is whatever, 5 days late, please respond. So I think those are the ways technology is enabling us to serve consumers better and get them included authentically, which is authentic inclusion.
Thank you. Very interesting. Bhuvan, you highlighted AI automation powering digital finance, and you alluded to such benefits such as personalized services and real-time decisions, and also about how technology convergence can streamline risk and compliance functions. So how do you see these trends impacting market players? And can you share a little bit about what you guys are doing on this topic? Thank you.
You know, it's so interesting. Paul mentioned data capture, ingestion of more data that goes into scores. You mentioned the utilization and definition and reading and understanding what the score and the data is trying to say. You mentioned about distribution and access to those scores. So, I mean, comparing that to, I mean, I feel like it's a bright future ahead. Everyone is kind of addressing different parts of the problem. And so it's really, very refreshing to see that there's actually a way forward with all these challenges we have today. So I think our participation today maybe is on the infrastructure piece when it comes to AI and automation. How do we enable the actual ingestion of the data? So maybe one step earlier, the tools that the banks would need so that they can themselves ingest the information, the processes, the policies. We are more heavily involved in that area. So this includes, for example, what tools do they need internally? I think you mentioned data capture for documents. Yes, for sure. We would need, the banks would need something like that. Then it comes to things like, okay, what if a credit application goes into a manual evaluation bucket? How do we address that specific or automate away that specific bucket of cases? And then maybe take it another step further. Okay, you've got to do a refresh of your internal scoring within the bank on an annual basis. Every bank has to do it. They typically use dual scoring, our score and also their own internal score. When they do their internal scoring reevaluation, they would need some sort of platform as opposed to using the historical way of having a bunch of people, analysts, very smart people looking at a bunch of different data sets and putting that into like a Gini score of some sort, using a tool instead that we provide to the banks, and just simplifying that entire process, just making the score a lot more predictive and current really in terms of predictiveness. So that's something that's currently already in place. We don't see people being replaced completely. I think Prof. Muru was saying something earlier about this, where it's really going to be people, they're still going to be there because they're going to be decisions that we wouldn't want the machine to make. So for example, you apply for a mortgage and the application gets rejected for this subject. They would have an appeals process. You would still need a person to face that applicant, get the additional information, understand why there was a difference in the scoring and so on. There is a person-to-person conversation there where, I think earlier Prof. Muru mentioned about we have to fight the machine against the machine, but in kind of this case, we still have to have a person facing the person. You can't tell the person to go face a machine and solve your issues for you. It doesn't quite work. So that's one area. I think that automation piece, the infrastructure to do automation and AI, that's one area that we are involved in. I think the other area has been customization. So we work on, I think a very, very simple examples are APIs. These are becoming very common these days. But I think what is maybe a bit painful when it comes to API adoption is that all APIs are standard APIs. And so if you go to a bank or any of these other players, even exporters, and say you can use these platforms and so on, and you can do the integration, here's my API documentation, there will be, the API spec will tell you, okay, these are the input fields that you will fire into the API, these are the 300 or 400 fields you're going to get back. And the IT team now needs to figure out, okay, which of these fields matches into my database structure that's sitting across multiple databases, some in the cloud, some on-premise, and so on. How am I going to do this mapping? It's a huge step. It's actually faster to enable that adoption when we customize our APIs for them. So the output already matches the database structure of the customer in some way, and AI is super good at doing that, customizing APIs for specific use cases, twisting it around, to match database structures. It works very well for that type of use case. So that's something that's already ongoing. In terms of the convergence of compliance and risk products, I think really it's about a unified solution moving forward. So I think even end of May last month, we had a couple of banks in Malaysia that got fined for not following the proper regulatory procedures. And if you look at the details of why, they just couldn't keep up with the requirements. They don't understand the changes, certain things have changed and they did not adhere to it and so on. And the problem is just that the scale of the problem is so big, they can't really look at every single account. And so part of the issue is the systems and platforms are not really built to do this. And so I think we already have some of our customers who are moving away to a unified system where the information that is captured from documents and so on goes immediately into a risk evaluation process. The compliance process is integrated into that. It's happening simultaneously as opposed to historically it being two separate functions that are not related in any way and are overseen in very different ways. It's kind of becoming a unified system moving forward. And again, our role really is to enable those type of platforms and systems for the customer so that either they adopt select modules or they decide to adopt the entire end-to-end solution. That's something that they can opt to do. And then, of course, it includes all the continuous monitoring. So, of course, this is all driven by regulation. Governments are forcing us to do this, are forcing the banks to do this. And so we need to support the industry in order to keep up with this.
Thank you. I think, Bhuvan, this is kind of an assist for what I wanted to ask Elias. So thank you on that because you mentioned regulation. And obviously now, you know, Gen AI is obviously a seismic shift in the way that we do business. And so regulation has to catch up to that. So in terms of regulatory framework, and I know here in the audience we're both industry professionals as well as regulators. So I think one of the key topics is how do you balance, you know, new regulation on this versus the needs of the business? And Elias, I know you have experience on this in Brazil, so can you give us a little bit of your input?
Yeah, let me see if I can put this slide here. Let's see if you can put this. Okay, I have it here.
There we go.
Well, I think
It's
this is the AI journey. It's already mentioned. Let's go to the second, okay? So what you see on the left-hand side here is the car regulation in 1856. The car was very dangerous. Everybody was scared about the car. So you to have a car, you need to have a red flag man working in front of the car, otherwise you're not allowed. So this is what happened with the regulators. I used to be a regulator. So the regulators are scared, you know, to make mistakes, and they end up overruling, okay, what you have to do. So this is what I have been using with some Brazilian authorities, and that say, you know what, if you do that, this is what you're going to happen, you know. So let's learn what was already done. Like, you know what, let me train the driver, let me put sidewalks, let you have traffic lights, let have, what can I say, crossing lanes, and let have the penalties related with this new reality. So from the regulatory standpoint, what I can share with you, I have the privilege to work in 14 countries, 10 in Latin America, 3 in Europe, and one was Canada. And what I learned is you have to adapt, you have to approach regulation according to the culture. Okay? If you go to the Anglo-Saxons, they can say they value transparency. Okay? They like, you know, things to be clear. If you go to Latin countries, it's the other way around. They think hiding data, you're going to protect the consumer. Right? So you have been working in Latin America, you know how it is, right? So we have all, regarding AI, we started to promote a more principiological approach on the law, but we in Brazil, we end up copy and paste what happened in Europe. So this is why I'm part of Axis, and I have a preview 3 years before coming to Brazil. So with this approach, we were able to change the data protection law in Brazil, including one legal base to use personal data, which is credit protection. It's, I think it's the only country worldwide that has credit protection in the law. So they started with the rule-based. Okay, so put all the requirements, all the points that you need to follow, and it was a hard work to be done. But we have also to understand that we are passing by taking for a form, not the technical structural, let's go to psychosocial. We have 2 dimensions here. Technology is great, I love technology, but we have people. Okay, so talking about people at the end of the day, what happened? What are the perceptions they have? So the market, they see that AI coming will bring 93% that see benefits just to the leaders, and 90% see the benefits to the employees. Okay, but people see AI to be more used, to personalization, and 75% as a work ally, and 32% they still perceive as a threat. Right? So these are the perceptions that they have. What are the people concerns of using AI? Healthcare, finance, transparency, and privacy. This is what we have made in a survey. And what are these legislators worried about? Privacy, accountability, bias, ethical, safety, security, regulatory compliance, and systemic risks. So you see, we have 3 different visions. How we can work with that, in a way to harmonize, a legislation that should be fair, should not prevent innovation, and should, be flexible, because I see a regulation is not a track. A regulation is a path, so have to be adjusted. So we can adjust, okay? So what strategy we have done in Brazil? First, we work very close with the legislators, okay? Leaders. We have been working on AI for 3 years in advance. So legislation came, first was principiological, they changed it, they copy-paste the European, and we have to work, how can I say, and 3 major points in Brazil. And as I am part of RCG, represent Latin America, I can give you, we added another 3 points to cover the region. Let me go to this point. First point was the AI definition. The first definition that came was even a turbo, Excel was AI. Okay? The second thing that we have worked with them is about the use of synthetic data, okay, to train. So this was another point. This is regarding Latin America. The third point was discrimination. Said, no, what? Credit analysis is a legitimate discrimination. So they understood that. Okay? So credit is not a right, it's a concession. Sometimes some people on the populistic government, they see credit as a right. You have a right to have credit. No, you have a right to be visible, to deal with the credit opportunity. So we have moving this speech, and the fourth point was about high risk. And was interesting because we have many meetings with the Ministry of Finance. We have with the key leaders and the Congress. We have also with the cabinet of the presidency. And the guy was very radical. So, now what? I will put it like this. And said, we as a credit bureau, we have resources to deal, with the high risk and the requirements. But do you think if you do that, are you going to democratize the use of AI? Are you sure that putting that is going to bring the best benefit to the country? The guy said, no, what? Let me think about it. I rather remain silent. Let's see what's going to happen. So this is what the other point that we talked to them. The other point was about governance. Governance to be, can I say, centralized. I say, you know what, to us, going to be better if the regulator for a specific sector has, the power, to deal the use of AI, because you are not going to be able to deal with everything. You cannot understand everything. And the fourth one, let me see here, was penalties. They came with a legislation that have penalties that was already addressed with the civil code. So we have overlap of penalties because we have AI. So you know what? Let's use what we already have as a penalty of misuse. Don't create a new rules, because this is not going to bring us, a legal, a good environment to operate. So we worked also with them. We developed a technical paper regarding those 6 points for Latin America. We are submitting now in South Africa with all the rationales, and we are going to bring some examples of the use of AI, what were the benefits. And these were the points that we end up addressing. But another thing was very important is that we also worked very close with the Data Protection Agency. And I have a meeting with them, was really interesting, because I have done 2 meetings with the president. I have another meeting with the directors and so on. And they said, let's start the conversation, let's talk about credit. They said, we are very scared of use of data and credit. I said, why? So we said, no, what? So I said, see, we use data with the best international practices regarding protection. Second point, we were certified by the central bank with all the requirements that you need to receive financial data. And third, we work very close, with the entities and worldwide, to share best practices that we have and receive, the best practices that we can learn. Well, after 1 hour and a half meeting, I said, okay. He said, no, I'm not scared anymore. I'm worried. I said, okay, let's keep the conversation going. And as part of this conversation, I said, you know what? Let's do a work together. Why don't we do the self-regulation regulated? He said, what do you mean by that? I said, the Article 50 that we have in the law that we put there was if a sector is able to submit your code of conduct or the best practice, the authority is able to review it and to certify that and make it public. So this is, I have to convince my 5 stakeholders at ANBC, the 5 presidents, and what it's better to be proactive, it's better to work close, it's better to contribute. And they said, you know what, this is about lobbies, This is about sector diplomacy. I'm not here to take advantage just to the sector. We have to do what is best also to the country. Otherwise, we're not going to get respect. So this is where we are. And instead of blaming the darkness, we decided to set a candle. So in Brazil, we end up establishing a legislative front. It's allowed by law on the name of democratization of credit. We have more than 200 congressmen being part of that, and the NBC is leading that. Said what we have to do, we have to educate the legislator, you have to educate the regulator, and this is the path we are following now in Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you. That was an incredible testament. Thank you. So we looked at AI from individuals, business, industry, suppliers, regulator. Let's bring it, you mentioned, Diederik, human-centered AI. So let's bring it back to consumers where we started, because that's kind of the end users of this. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you guys are doing in that aspect?
Absolutely. For me, what's very interesting these days is to learn about what the kind of thinking over here is. And yesterday when I was on stage, when I presented about our human-centered AI approaches, I asked the audience, what do you see as the biggest opportunity? And the answer was financial inclusion, making the unseen seen. And still we are not doing that. And being a fintech entrepreneur, but also with one leg still in the board of IKEA in the traditional worlds, I all relate things back to a leadership problem. It's us that stop us from doing that, because we are afraid for change. And that's why we act kind of strange. I think the Experian report this morning showed that 68% of the leaders invest in AI, not for financial inclusion or making the unseen seen, no, for automating internal processes. That's us. So why don't we shift the lens? It's a leadership issue. Shift the lens from our own finances only to more behavioral finance. And that's where human-centered AI comes in. That's where also why we started this a decade ago. And what we did was a long, and I must say, kind of frustrating research journey, because the idea with research is that most experiments fail, and that's very disappointing. But what we did is we started in 2013 with very long questionnaires, trying to investigate if we could get insight in the psychometric profiles of consumers and small business entrepreneurs. And what we discovered after several experiments, changing questions, changing the angles, because nothing worked in the beginning, after 2 years we discovered that there were certain features that had real predictive value for credit risk. Features like financial skills, someone's level of drive for materialism, impulse buying tendency. We see confidence, especially with entrepreneurs who are overconfident, which is a risky factor. But it were very long questionnaires. And it were only the psychometric features. So that brought us to the next step, to not only look at the psychometrics, but integrate it with behavioral finance type of drivers and automate the questions. Not that we could present them digitally, but in a way that we could attract the insights from digital data sources, because we wanted to get rid of the questionnaires. And that crushes the customer experience. Nobody wants a questionnaire added to its customer application process or collection process or whatever. After several years and lots of tests with lenders across the world, we discovered that that was possible. So, for example, now we get insights in creditworthiness and or fraud risk from email-related data, email-related attributes. We can see, based on how people write, if there's a risk for fraud. We can, based on how people speak, estimate if it's a fraudster or not. And it's not 100% correct estimate, but it improves because we have learning loops in place. And I think that's the way to go. That's how AI is going to evolve. We talked about banking 4.0. I wrote a book about banking 5.0, which will be published at the end of the year with the title Brilliant Data. That's about this transformation. How do you do that? Because it comes all back to leadership. We can have the insights, but someone has to drive the actions. Someone has to say to the credit bureaus and to the governments internally, this is what we're going to do. And therefore you need to be brave, but you also need to understand how to do it, how to act. What does good look like? Because we don't know, it's a different world. We don't have a definition of success in that, other than increasing the profit. That's not defined yet. So we need to have brave leaders and brave people who dare to drive that transformation. And it's not a transformation, like I said, of data or of technology. It's a transformation of intent, of leadership, and also of business models. And that's what we come back to later. But we also discussed a lot about the gig workers, the next generations, people who don't want to go to work anymore, but stay at home. Well, I can tell you, based on our experience, these type of people also have different shopping behaviors. I visited IKEA over here this week. These people, they shop fidgetily, is what they call it. So they browse on their mobile phones while they are in store, and then it's unclear where they buy things. They want a different way of doing business. They need credit when they need it, at the moment that they need it, and they don't want to own things anymore, they want to share things. So it's very instant, but it also should be instantly stopped. Traditional business models are not fit for that. We are built for the owning industry, we sell things. And that's something I think that also comes back to leadership. We have to be brave enough to acknowledge that. Our business models are old-fashioned, and we have to transform that. And that's why I think 90% of my time as fintech leader these days, I talk to CEOs, not talking about data, not talking about AI, but talking about the shift and talking about what that means for their company and how they can start doing things. So for me, AI is about human-centered. AI is about making the unseen seen, and also people who are seen, changing the offering that we have to a more instant, sharing-based solutions.
Amazing, thank you. And I share Puven's hope, seeing that everybody's looking at this problem from multiple angles, and that there is, well, that it's not necessarily a problem, that it is a topic, and we're looking at it in the industry, and that's fascinating. So let's park AI for a second now, and let's move on to the second set of the topics that you guys highlighted. Now, Paul, I believe you mentioned that the use of technology to knit together the ecosystem of finance players. Can you give us some specific examples and use cases of how you think this is one of the topics that will revolutionize the way we do business?
Yeah, definitely. And basically, it's a great follow-up on all the elements that have been brought in, whether we talk about inclusion in different ways, whether we talk about thinking about the greater good of AI and what it does for us as human beings in terms of helping us to decide and to do things differently, but also, thinking about the regulatory side and thinking about what Diederik said about business models. It's exactly that. It's all of that together. Basically, ecosystems today are representing all of these aspects, and we know them in the form of what I said initially, BNPL solutions, for instance, buy now, pay later. But there are quite a few of these solutions around us, whether they allow us to basically seamlessly acquire real estate with different players involved, and in identifying documentation, etc., and going all the way down to the process of buying something, healthcare. We obviously know about supply chain finance solutions with all the different parties involved into these solutions, making the entire flow of information really seamless and easy to use in a user-friendly environment. Procure-to-pay solutions, which are doing the same thing. So typically, we also as CDROs, we start participating very, very often in these kind of ecosystems where you typically have 5 parties involved now, where you would have your technology company that is providing the foundation, fintech and payment platform providers, the data providers like us. You would have the regulators and the supervisory bodies of certain sectors that are getting involved, and then other financial services companies, insurance companies, etc., who are entirely part of the value chain. It's something that we've been used to actually consider. There obviously has been an acceleration of these platforms. Some would say Mr. COVID, some others would say, we're really thinking about the inclusion element, and it is a fact that these technologies have enabled underbanked, on the finance communities, whether those are individuals or SMEs, to basically have access to financial services. That is very clear. But then obviously the players within that ecosystem are also benefiting from the fact that they can work together, think together about solutions, look at what it means to actually continuously invest into solutions that are becoming cheaper. Obviously you use AI, but there's cloud computing, there's all sorts of capabilities. You use established existing technologies, whether it is blockchain, decentralized finance solutions, etc. All of that becomes available. It becomes cheaper to actually develop these solutions together. And it also obviously allowed, and we see it as well in a couple of these ecosystems in which we are involved, the more traditional financial players are using this as an opportunity for them to continue thinking about market segments and areas where traditionally they would have had to compete head-to-head with the big tech companies and with the fintech players. So that is really creating an environment where all the various players that are involved in the thought process of actually first delivering to thinking about what the future should look like is really helping the entire ecosystem to evolve together. And the foundation of that is definitely the technology, and from our point of view, being a big driver when it comes to thinking about the availability of data, producing more data synthetically, then and then play our role into that ecosystem. So definitely, I mean, for me, the message then is really again looking at AI as an enabler. At this point, we all talk about the positive human impact, and I hope that will continue in the next couple of years. For the time being, I still have the feeling that is very much the case.
Until Skynet, sure. So, Indy, you're based in Hong Kong, which is a city close to my heart, and I know Paul's as well. I lived there and I worked in the region for 7 years. So when you talk about cross-border trade with an Asian flair, I think I know what you mean, but I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so, when we are looking at, financial inclusion, trade, cross-border trade is a critical part of it, especially in Asia, because, SME, MSME data is just not present, But, so the more important part is what is present. So what is present is bill of lading data. There are depths of data, there is data structures available, multiple languages. What AI is giving us today, ability to process, synthesize that data, and create a database structure or multi-layer relationships, which was just not possible because every BL earlier was in the local language. A Vietnamese BL and an Indian BL and a Chinese BL. You could just not correlate the physical product, the supply chain, the finance, and the payment. It was not possible. So once you have these data coming in, and you have availability of that data, one part is, of course, the processing bit itself. If you can extract the information, if you can pass on that information to a SME telling what to negotiate with the buyer or seller, taking that decision point directly to the person who is involved. Those are the exciting use cases wherein people can actually look at data, look at synthesized data, look at the credibility of the importer or exporter. The second part, which actually excites us a lot, is how is it that multiple locations don't share financial data? And part of non-inclusion in any financial relationship has been for lack of word, standardized credit assessment. That's how we define it. But what if we can use this trade data and the actual shipment data and the actual adjacent code and the actual shipment frequency and understand the actual counterparty risk? Because at the end of day, credit risk for a cross-border trade, counterparty risk is one of the biggest elements that we are trading, right? So how do you actually granularize that data, formalize that data? The third part is, of course, there's a lot of trade-based money laundering happening. That's one of the things which regulators have been looking at. They have been trying to sort that issue. But fundamentally, trade-based money laundering is a layered process. So it's a multi-layer. It's not a single layer fraud that is happening any longer. That's what we are seeing. And the EDDs and the CDDs will work, but if you don't have transactional due diligence, if you don't have ability to understand who is supplier of the supplier or buyer relationships, buyer bank ecosystems, you will not be able to catch those frauds. So we see a lot of requirement coming in there. The other part is, of course, on the related party side of it, because what we see on a trade fraud, trade supply chain finance, embedded finance, goods finance, warehouse finance, you can just create a supply chain right from counterparty to delivery. The related party angle is very important. Is it the same entities being related? Not in terms of, shareholding is a very traditional concept of related party. But is it related in multiple other ways? Do these change actually sort of collapse? There are NLP methods, there are graph methods, which actually bring out how these trade frauds actually correlate with each other and how these are generated. The other thing is also, when we are looking at trade, we have always looked at trade supporting trade finance, but we have really not looked at, how do you let the banks target? There is no targeting engine today to find the counterparties for their own corporate finance business. So AI is giving us these capabilities, which from a cross-border trade perspective was actually not feasible, maybe a year and a half back, because we just didn't have the processing power or the language power to make sense out of it. So very looking forward to actually this trade becoming part of the data set that we use to understand the credit risk.
Thank you for that. Now, Mayur, you kind of flipped the script on AI, not artificial intelligence, but authentic inclusion, which I love as a term. So when you talk about ML, something tells me you're also not talking about training models or automation, right?
Yeah, not automation, but aspiration, right? So think about it. The consumer is now included, right? What next? Inclusion in and of its own does not enable consumers to meet their life goals, right? Inclusion just gets you inside the door. Consumers have an aspiration to then use that position to do more in life, right? Move up in life. And to do that, they need to be empowered with the right tools and knowledge to do so, right? Not just them, also the ecosystem that they deal with. So Indy spoke about counterparties, right? You need to empower the ecosystem with the right tools so that consumers can transact with confidence in digital finance and commerce, right? So I want to talk about a few examples of that. And the framework I want to use is the life stages of a consumer, right? So let's think about the early... So by the way, my ML is meeting life goals, right? Is what I'm going to talk about. So let's talk about the first life stage, right? So you got your first credit product. You got so now you have a bureau score, right? The first piece is in empowering the consumer is for enabling the consumer to understand how good is that credit score, right? How does that compare to other people in the city, in the country, right? Is this good enough to go out and shop for the next credit product? Right? Is it competitive? Are you the top 1% of the country in your credit score? That is powerful information, right? Because then you can go out with that and you can transact with much more confidence, right? If you know you're in the top 1%. Or is it not that good? Your score is not that good. In which case, technology now enables us, again, at scale, at population scale, to tell every individual what is their next best action to improve their credit score, right? Which could be unique for every individual because every individual's file is unique, right? So you could actually tell a consumer that, hey, for you, if you pay down this loan, then your credit score goes up by 20 points, right? And that's intelligence and empowerment for the consumer. The consumer may say, but I cannot pay down this loan. I don't have this much money. I can pay only half of it today. What will my credit score go up to then, right? So we have these credit simulator tools, right, which consumers can go and experiment with and play around with. And it empowers them to take control of their financial future, right, and take the next best action, right? The technology that powers this at TransUnion is called Credit View, right? And I think the other part of Credit View is, let's say one of your life goals is you want to roam the world, right? And you aspire for a travel credit card. Let's say you have only one credit card. You want to get your hands on a travel credit card, but today your credit score doesn't empower you to get one, right? With your consent, technology enables us to put your file on watch so that tomorrow, as your credit score goes up, if there's an offer from a bank for a travel card, we can give you that offer at the right time, through the right channel, to the right customer, right? So that is the other part, what Credit View enables as a technology, right? So this is the first life stage, right? Early in your credit journey. Let's talk about the second life stage, right? You're changing your job, right? And credit information actually helps you, in many countries, onboard into your new job faster, right? How does it do that? Every employer will do some kind of a background check on you when you take your new job, right? And at a very minimal, the credit report has your addresses, right? Your last address and things like that, right? So it does in some way, we have a consented mechanism in many countries. With the push of a button, you can share your credit report with your future employer, and that does help them onboard you faster, right? But even more specifically, for some kinds of jobs that deal directly with cash, right? The credit report is almost always pulled in many developed countries, right? And the reason for that is, Indy spoke about counterparty risk, right? As an employer, you obviously don't want to engage with somebody who is in financial distress dealing with cash, right? Because the chances are that they will be encouraged to embezzle the funds, right? So it is a standard use case emerging in many economies now to pull the credit report, before employment, especially for some kind of jobs. Next life stage, right? So you got the job, you need to change your city, right? You move to a different city, you need an apartment on rent, and you come to this landlord who is another counterparty, a different kind of counterparty. He has not seen you, he doesn't know who you are, right? How does he trust you, right? So we have rental screening in many markets where again, with your consent, you can share your credit report with your landlord. The landlord sees that this guy has been paying all his bills on time for the last 5 years. Chances are he'll pay my rent on time, right? And that gives him the confidence to give you his apartment on rent, right? Next life stage, right? So you've settled into this new home. You probably have a family now. You want to protect them with insurance, right? I think many of you will know, if your credit score is high in many countries, you need to pay a lower insurance premium, right? Which is a great way also of empowering the customer, right? In a different form on protection, right? And we have proven this with data in almost every country, right? And this works at population scale. And the reason it works is, probably the simplest way to explain this is, if you're paying your bills on time, so if your credit score is high, right? It talks about your discipline as a consumer, right? You're a very disciplined person. If you're disciplined in paying your bills, chances are you're disciplined in other aspects of your life as well. For example, taking care of your health, right? So if you're disciplined in taking care of your health, chances that you will file a large claim on an insurance company is probably lesser, right? And that is why the insurance company is happy to pass that benefit to you in the form of a lower premium. So again, this is an established use case in many developed markets. Hope it comes to many of our Asia markets soon. But credit information is empowering you now even to protect yourself and your families with insurance, right? The last life stage I want to talk about is, so you have 20 years of experience, you get a magnificent offer from abroad, and you say, okay, let's move abroad, right? But guess what? You move abroad, you become new to credit, right? In that country. You spend 20 years building your credit in one country. You move to the other country, you're new to credit, right? So technology today is empowering us to, again, with consent and with the click of a button, at least with some countries, you can now share your credit file in real time. Let's say you're moving to the US with Amex US, right? And not just share the credit file, you can also convert that, let's say, an India credit score to a US credit score, so that Amex US doesn't need to worry, what do I do with this India score? I don't know how to read this, because I understand the US scores. You can do all of that with technology in real time now, and they port that information and read it in the way they're used to consuming it, right? And that can enable you to get your card in the US. And again, this is all already happening, right? So this is the other piece which I want to talk about, which is, a lot of people think that credit bureaus are still about credit reports and scores. I think we are moving in a world where that is not the case anymore, right? And this is the credit information is indeed powering ML, which is enabling people to meet their life goals.
Beautiful, thank you. Now, Puvan, you highlighted the evolving demands on technology providers that come from the rapid changes in digital finance and trade. Now, I'm sure that being in this industry, you've observed what providers are already doing to meet these challenges. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I think before that, maybe I would just like to make a observation on this piece on inclusivity. I think there were many comments on exclusivity in terms of, the industry has to lead in some way. And then we have the data that is needed to create exclusivity, the tech to explain the exclusivity, then again, how do we get that message out, education and so on. Just to share how, an observation of how Malaysia is kind of tackling this, because I think and you'll understand what I mean, once I tell the story. We launched, I think, 5 digital banks, perhaps 2 years ago, last year, maybe 2 years ago. Of the 5 licenses that were given out, there were at least 2 that were specifically given out to address the underserved. So the reason why you are getting a digital license is to go after the underserved population. So we have categories in Malaysia that puts income into different tiers. You are specifically given a license to address this tier. There was another license that was given out specifically for women empowerment. So essentially for businesses for women. That license was specifically given out for that purpose. Again, we are keen to see how they actually end up executing this. But I think the message in that to me is that it's unlikely the private sector is going to go after this, because it's frankly not as profitable as the traditional business. The loss ratios for lower income loans and buy now, pay later and so on is just very different than the traditional banking sector. So it's not something that the large banks are racing to do. It would need a new type of provider to try and address this. So again, I think the way players are trying to play a part really is trying to come up or stitch together solutions that we already have, sometimes our own, sometimes working with partners. And we already see many new, even the business that Diederik is leading, for example, these are unique ideas that, unlikely we're going to build something in the next 1 year. It's much better for us to just partner and use that, component as part of our, solution that's essentially a best of class of every single component that we have, and we kind of marry it all together. So that's one area how we see, this players kind of addressing the market. Yes, we are also building new solutions, but there are also new entrants that are coming in now from the traditional industry. And also, we have advisory firms who are now offering platforms and solutions that essentially are competing solutions against a credit bureau, for example. And it is all being driven by the fact that this is a new regulatory landscape, a new technology landscape. And every time that happens, there is going to be new players from unexpected industries suddenly coming in and becoming a competitor, offering a competing solution and so on. So we then decide, do we partner with them? Or in some cases, we acquire. So in Indonesia and the Philippines, CTOS has acquired alternative credit scoring businesses, because we realized that to get through the regulatory hurdle of acquiring the data, to set up the scoring models, to understand that market, it's a huge endeavor. It is just better for us to acquire. So that type of market consolidation, I think, is going to continue to happen as well in order to address this type. So new players coming in, big players trying to build. When they can't build themselves, they buy, and then they consolidate and then try to compete another big brand that's doing something. So that's kind of the landscape. That's kind of what we see is happening from a players in terms of our industry at the moment.
Thank you for that. Now, Elias, you introduced another very relevant topic in terms of using of technology, and that's open banking. Mm-hmm. Now, I know this is something that a lot of us have been discussing, whether open banking fosters collaboration or competition between the market players. So I wanted to see, and it's obviously a very different experience in Europe and Asia, so I just wanted your feedback on experience instead in Brazil on this topic.
Can you put the slide again? Well, first of all, open banking is a consortium. Open banking is a consortium, okay, that The idea is to reduce asymmetry, foster, credit granting, reduce delinquency, bring competition, and promote innovation. Brazil is doing very well, again, with the open. We don't have open banking, we have open finance, right? It's a little bit different. We included insurance, pension, investment, and instant payment, which is also a great success that we have also in Brazil. And it will launch in 2021. 2023, 27 million consents. 2024, we have 43 million consents. And yesterday, I received a call from the central bank, and the number now is 62 million. Okay? 62 million. So we have more than 800 participants on that. It's very big. We have 9 billion calls, API calls. And the projection that we have in Brazil, this is missing a zero here, but 2030, open banking will be able to add $130 billion in our GDP. Okay? So competition, collaboration. What I can tell you, the fintechs was taking the majority of share data. So we have a new bank. It's 48% of the data shared. So the small institutions, they are really leveraging, the use of data. Itaú, which is one of the biggest, just 18%. And what I can have, fintechs and digital banks, they have around 17 million consents. They have with them, okay? So what we can have, as a partnership or competition. So we have a case between Itaú and Banco do Brasil, end up, developing a platform named Neo, just to compete with Nubank. Okay, because Nubank is besides of the size, according to the Brazilian regulation, they are considered fintech. What the benefit of that? They pay 17% taxes, and the banks pay 50% taxes. So this is one another point that I can bring to you. We have the fintechs making collaboration with insurance companies. So we have Nubank and Neon. Nubank with the Chubb insurance. And we have Neon with PNB Paribas. So there are also a collaboration. And this is the scenario that we have in Brazil. And we have something interesting, as I mentioned before. The Brazilians like technology, but we lack what Neil very well addressed yesterday, digital literacy. Okay?
Now, in chatting with you, I know that you're also extremely focused on cybersecurity, and that's one of the topics that you also...
Yeah, I can briefly talk about cybersecurity. Let me see here. Okay. So, talking about cyber, well, in Brazil we have at least 6 pillars, of cybersecurity: is water, energy, telecommunication, finance, also, and other. But finance is already there. What we have the top 5 concerns that we end up talking with them is API vulnerability, which is the endpoint. Data privacy and consent management is also a big concern. Third-party risk management. So as we have third-party, how are we going to manage that? Okay. We have identity authentication, and we have fraud. What we have done in Brazil as a top 5 best practices, first of all, zero trust architectures. Okay. Robust API, which is a F API, with is API with regulation regarding finance. Strength third party, okay? And if you are able now to run the video, okay? Just a quick video, just to break a little bit, make people wake up here. Come on.
Pat, here, if we can launch a video.
Okay.
Dag Fien. Dus, Caroline. Ik zie een school tegen Antwerpen.
Ja,
Insecten.
dat blieft?
Ik voel 2 insecten op je rug. Kan dat?
Ja, vlinders.
Slovenie?
Zo hè.
Een moto. Oranje.
Pas erop.
Zenit.
Oui, oui, bien.
Je hebt een vriendin. Julie de... Met wie?
Ja.
Een boeiend liefdesleven. 3, 4 zelfs.
Die vierde, daar zwijg ik meestal over, dus dat weten niet veel mensen.
Hoe is het met je spierscheur? Une maison rouge, balcon blanc. Ja. Ik zie geld, ik zie transacties, maar kent je rekeningnummer van buiten? Ik denk dat ik het wel weet. Die staat wel negatief op je bankrekening.
Ja?
97. Last month you spent €200 on alcohol. Vorige maand €300 aan kleding gespendeerd. 8.
Ja.
5. Voor een huis dat van eigenaar gaat veranderen. €795.000.
Ja, maar eigenlijk.
41.
Ja.
Is dat juist?
Ja, dat is juist. Oh my god. Oh nee. Ah, dat is, ik weet niet hoe eng.
So this is the final message. 80% of the cyber attacks comes from people. So I will add what you mentioned yesterday. Maybe cyber literacy will be also good to as a next stage of digital, because 80% what we have as a problem is really there. Thank you very much.
I see a lot of people right now canceling their Instagram accounts, so. Okay, Diederik, you touched on what I think is an extremely important point before, important and forward-looking. Basically, you've been saying that the recent transformative changes in technology are redefining not only the way in which we do business, but really the kind of business that we do. And you talked about different business models that are now possible and maybe necessary. So can you expand a bit on that, please?
Yes, definitely. This also goes back, in my opinion, to behavioral finance and leadership. And this is the title of my presentation yesterday, Beyond the Score. And actually, it's a call for action to all look beyond the score. What do these scores actually tell us? What do the underlying attributes tell us? And then ask yourself the question, and what do they not tell us? And that's, I think, the area we have to explore, and that's where the new business models come in. Because I earlier also said that if we look at gig workers, at the next generation, at all the self-employed people in this world, and they are increasing tremendously in number, small businesses, then they have different demands than where our businesses were shaped for. So it's a transformation from banking 3.0 to 4.0 to 5.0, where also the business models change from very product-centric, that's where most of us were shaped for, too customer-centric. That's currently what's going on, and that's more driven by ecosystems and open banking. In Europe, it's 40% people that accepted an open banking access. So also a way to go for us over there to really make this center of our risk decisioning. But a good first step. And that's where we come next, I think, hyper-personalization and inclusivity. These new generations want things instantly. They want things when they need it. And they don't want things anymore when they don't need it. So that's what's actually changing. Then also, if you look at some examples, I was a board member. I was responsible for retail banking with ING many years ago. We had a very successful direct bank, ING Direct, which we rolled out over the world. But it was very product-centric. Everything was standardized, and that was also the success. We could do it in Canada, in Australia, everywhere, and it all delivered very stable profits. What you see now is that people switch from banks to apps. And it's not your banking app, it's your Grab or your Uber or your Apple. Right? That's the preferred app on your phone. And that's also where our transactions move to. 60% of payment transactions in this world is going through new vendors, new suppliers, like Apple, for example. 40% of credit, and we do a lot of research with Cambridge University from our Advice Robo Labs with the Dutch Business School. Our recent paper shows that 40% of global credit goes through new players, like Amazon, like others. And 20% of insurances already goes through these kind of places. And in there, traditional scores and traditional approaches don't work anymore. Again, they have to be fast, instant, and showing a picture very fast in the checkout systems. And then one step beyond that is the development of what we have over here in Asia. You are leading that of super apps, where you combine experiences and where you also integrate finance in that. So, I don't have to explain you can book a taxi, but you can also do your payments, and you can go everywhere with your Grab app these days. That means that also the revenue models shift from traditional, what we did with ING, net interest margins, advisory fees, to more ecosystem-related things, like interchange fees. We monetize data. One of the examples is with Alipay, with Ant Financial, who's very well established in data monetization. And we get different type of models that drive our revenues. And I think that's also, maybe back to what you said about Malaysia. You said we need new business models. If we stick to the old way of doing finance, then I agree that the underserved are not a profitable business segment. But if you can move your business model to something else that drives other fees, then suddenly it becomes a business model that's profitable. And I also agree with you that new players do that more easily than established players. We also see that with IKEA, because it's easily set for a fintech CEO. Right? We have done many pivots in our existence in the past 13 years before we came where we currently are. For IKEA and a large company, that's much more difficult. But still, you need to be able to do that, to make the decision to completely put your IT infrastructure in the cloud, make it API enabled so you can serve these kind of customer segments. Well, to finish off, also in conscious of time, I've got 1 more minute, I see. These are, and this is what's also written in my book, these are what I expect the business models that will dominate the market in the upcoming years. First of all, it's of course the super apps that will outperform in the embedded finance area. And why they win is because people trust them. They are distributors. They are the touch points for the consumers and for the businesses. And they have different ways of monetization and embedded that in one stack. And secondly, it's the credit and microfinance companies, AI-powered. We see a lot of them in Latin America, really big ones, spread across many countries. They made financial inclusion into a very profitable business model by not, for example, lending money to one person, but to a group of persons. Different ways of risk decisioning. You need a lot of data and AI to do that properly. And also the collections is a very challenging area in that kind of businesses. But super big companies. And also over here in Asia, we see a lot of examples, especially Ant Group is doing very well in that aspect. And then the as-a-service companies. Like I said, people don't want to own things anymore. They want to share. And that's what it is. And that's where we as IKEA are moving into. So IKEA was being built on making affordable products that people use for some years and then they replace. That's not working anymore. It's not sustainable. And so we shifted to an as-a-service model where we move into sofa leasing, kitchen leasing, things like that. Well, that's the leaders in IKEA are very brave that they dare to do that. They dare to say to their founders, this is not the way forward anymore. We have to shift. So I think that's the third model, the as-a-service models that will dominate the markets going forward.
Thank you for that. Did you have another comment? No, sorry, Elias, I thought you were looking at me, but probably just conscious of time, right?
Okay, just a quick, we are talking about technology, but technology, see, we have in Brazil is moving from cloud to AI, blockchain, and the next will be quantum computing, which the central bank in Brazil is already done. It's already doing some work on that. What I see is as the AI is, as internet gave us the digital transformation, AI will be a cognitive transformation. But this cognitive transformation is not going to happen if you don't have the right people, even internally or externally. But I changed 80% of my workforce because I have to introduce AI, because I have a resistance. And the profile that I said is flexibility and resilience, teamwork, communication, creativity, critical thinking, which is key, and emotional intelligence. So I will rename artificial intelligence as expanded intelligence. And the world that we have a transformation, a hybrid, you know, we have a centaur, people that are starting to use, I use 9 tools already more than a year. So we're going to become a cyborg in the future. But in the world of cyborgs, the one who has a heart is a king. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to all the panelists for an extremely interesting topic. In the interest of time, I don't think we have time for questions, but please reach out to any of the panelists during the networking. I'm sure they have a lot more to share. Thank you very much, everybody.
Group picture. You could take a panel picture. Panel picture. Thank you, gentlemen. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well done. There were some tall guys in that panel, weren't there? I thought I was tall. Definitely not. I'm shrinking, obviously, with age. Great. Well, that's. I think hopefully you've found that panel very comprehensive. I mean, there's some fantastic thoughts going on there and a good range of thoughts from consumer through to businesses. So I have no doubts that there were a few slides, but you didn't need the slides because hopefully I think you were pretty much engaged. And I was looking around and I think a lot of you were very much engaged in some of the comments. there's a lot there. So please, as Vincenzo says, pick up those panelists over lunch and maybe the networking break later on. So we are going to go to lunch now. We are going to feed you. We're going to have lunch in the restaurant called JB Terrace, which is actually on the ground floor, so it's not far from here. You'll see the sign, please wear your badge, otherwise you don't get fed. So I'm not going to get fed because I haven't got my badge on. No, so please wear that because obviously it's important. We'd like to try and come back here at 2 o'clock if possible. We're a little bit running over, so if we start 5 minutes later, we're going to the high energy thing next, which is regulation after lunch. Who the hell designed that program? Me. Okay. No, but there's a lot to talk about in the regulatory world. It's already been mentioned. You had a glimpse of it in this panel. So please be back promptly for exciting session on regulation. Yes? Oh, that didn't work, did it? Exciting session on regulation. Yes? Yeah. Great. Okay, enjoy lunch, and we'll see you back here at 2 o'clock or as near as possible. Thank you very much.